everyone. Good evening. I'm Brian Trumbore with your nightly review for Wednesday, June 12th. It is 4:02 p.m. Dow Jones finished down 127 points today to 14,994, so below 15,000. Down about 0.8%. S&P 500 lost 13, 0.8% to 1612. NASDAQ was down 1% to an even 3,400. Volatility has picked up in a big way since May 22nd. Federal Reserve meets next week, a critical meeting in terms of the statement that follows the two-day session. And the market just has all kinds of problems trying to decipher what the Fed's next move will be and whether or not they are going to pull back on their $85 billion a month in bonds. Gold closed at $13.87, oil $95.80, and the 10-year Treasury is up to 2.23%. Remember, on May 2nd, it was at 1.63. So a substantial move in a short period of time. It being Wednesday, it's Bull Bear Day. The contrarian indicator most of the time, or it's supposed to be treated that way, bulls are down to 43.8, bears 22.9. In Tokyo, the Nikkei was down 0.2%. Bank of Japan Governor Kuroda said current monetary policy seemed sufficient, which disappointed some looking for further stimulus programs. The Bank of Japan said in a statement that Japan's economy had been picking up and was expected to return to a moderate recovery path, which is part of the reason why Kuroda says they can just stand still for the time being. London was down 0.6%, Paris down 0.4%, Frankfurt down 1% today. In the UK, the unemployment rate came in at 7.8% as the British economy continues to improve, slowly but surely, at least in my eyes. Eurozone industrial production increased 0.4% in April over March. That was better than expected. Industrial production in Germany was up 1.2%, up 2.3% in France, but it was down in Italy and Spain. Back in the U.S., I should have mentioned this up top. According to the Treasury Department, the U.S. budget deficit widened in May from a year earlier on a 10% increase in spending. Outlays exceeded receipts by $138.7 billion last month, compared with a $124.6 billion shortfall in May 2012. For the first 8 months of the 2013 fiscal year that began last October 1st, the nation's deficit has shrunk to $626.3 billion, compared with a $844.5 billion shortfall over the same period a year ago. Remember, on May 14th, the Congressional Budget Office announced that the deficit would shrink this year to $642 billion, which would be the narrowest since 2008, and we're already at 626 for the first 8 months. But they continue to expect an improving picture the next 4 months, and there are going to be some big dividends, or a big dividend, from both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. The debt ceiling should be hit in October or November. If you're traveling in France, make sure you check ahead. More than a quarter of flights from France's busiest airports had to be canceled on Wednesday amid a 3-day controller strike. Air traffic controllers in France are upset over plans for a single European airspace. Ryanair had to cancel 240 flights on Wednesday. Big scandal in Spain. Footballer Lionel Messi, the World Player of the Year, is being investigated for tax fraud in Spain. His salary for Barcelona is about $21 million. Well, Messi and his father are being investigated for allegedly defrauding the state of more than $5 million. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. All right, time for a little personal reflection. So President Xi Jinping of China and Barack Obama had their 2-day summit, and it seems little was accomplished on the key issue of cybersecurity and China ripping off U.S. intellectual property. Nothing will change in this regard. Of course, when it comes to issues of integrity, China has none. Oh, the United States is full of dirtballs and scumbags too, but I want to share a painful, personal story of how the Chinese totally screwed me. So the following is from a letter I recently sent my congressman, whose name I will leave out. I have been in contact since with his staff. Dear Congressman, I am a large investor in a Chinese company, China Clean Energy, Inc., out of Fujian province, which is equidistant between Hong Kong and Shanghai. The company is involved in the manufacture of specialty chemicals and, depending on market conditions, biodiesel. About 1 year ago, the company, which has raised substantial funds in the United States, went dark. While it is still possible to trade the stock, the company has refused to supply any financial information whatsoever since last August and September, and has delisted from NASDAQ. As an investor, I did everything right in terms of due diligence. After I began to build a position in the company, which ended up being in excess of 2% of the shares outstanding, I traveled to Fujian to see the plant and meet with management in April of 2007. I knew CCGY had plans to build a far larger facility at a new port about an hour away, and was shown those plans during my visit. I then returned in November of 2008 to make sure the new plant was indeed getting built and to check out the surrounding port area. I was attracted by the fact this particular location was the closest point on the Chinese mainland to Taiwan, and thus the future possibilities of trade between the two were significant, let alone the growth potential for CCGY's products in Fujian itself, which is a relatively undeveloped province compared to some of its neighbors. I then stayed in touch with the company CFO, who divided his time between New York and China, and had quarterly dinners in New York with him. The plant was completed and business began to roll in. I recognized, however, that the company, being of a highly cyclical nature, was subject to the whims of the overall Chinese economy when it came to earnings. But by November 2010, even after the market crash, I had a solid profit on my sizable investment. Then all hell broke loose. beginning with the revelations that a Chinese company that had raised significant sums in the U.S. while attracting the likes of hedge fund king John Paulson, Sino-Forest, was a fraud. Immediately, all Chinese companies traded here took a hit. Which ones were real? Which weren't? CCGY was treated like the rest and thrown out with the bathwater. Since then, roughly the past 2 years, as you are aware, many Chinese companies have delisted, gone dark, and essentially wiped out U.S. investors. This is a crime. It must be part of the discussions between Presidents Obama and Xi. I took note the other day that Xi said he would ensure China is more open to foreign investment and that intellectual property would be protected. But U.S. investors must know that at the very least there is transparency and accounting when it comes to Chinese companies listing in the United States. We obviously dropped the ball big time. I wrote the SEC of my situation last summer and did not receive even a basic reply that it had been received. I am aware of a large U.S. corporation that is a customer of CCGY. CCGY is doing business normally to this date as best as some of us shareholders can ascertain. And this U.S. company broke their own rules of conduct in not ensuring that the companies they did business with were transparent in their finances. I brought this important detail to the attention of a senior manager at the company, Pennsylvania-based, last fall. He was nice enough to see me at their headquarters, but I surprised him with my knowledge of his operation on the ethics end. There's been no further contact since, but that's about to change. Congress should know of this important sidebar as well. Investors were hurt. They didn't need to be. I left out just a little from my correspondence. President Xi, by the way, was governor of Fujian province years ago and undoubtedly knows of CCGY because it has been around a long time. The CEO, who I met in 2007, appeared to be a stalwart of the Communist Party. Fujian, by the way, is where all the missiles are targeting Taiwan. This story isn't over, not if I have any say in it. Back tomorrow. Take care.